we have a crisis in the world, tremendous crisis, and also crisis in our consciousness, in us. I see the urgency of change, radical revolution, mutation in the mind. I see it. It is necessary. There is complete quietness of the mind, and that which is silent has vast space. Only then that which is nameless comes into being.
This is Urgency of Change, the Krishnamurti podcast. Here you have the clue or the key to observe without the old brain responding. When the old brain doesn't respond, there is the quality of a new brain coming into being. Hello and welcome to episode 171 of Urgency of Change. Each episode of the Krishnamurti podcast is compiled from carefully chosen extracts from our archives, representing Krishnamurti's different approaches to fundamental issues and questions we all face in our lives. This week's theme is the brain. Upcoming themes are insight, discipline, and spirituality. This is a podcast from Krishnamurti Foundation Trust. Please visit the official YouTube channel for hundreds of advert-free, full-length video and audio recordings of Krishnamurti's talks. In addition, the Foundation's own channel features hundreds of specially selected clips. You can also find our regular quotes and videos on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Krishnamurti Foundation Trust. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, which helps our visibility. This week's episode on the brain has 3 sections. This first extract is from Krishnamurti's second talk in Saanen, 1983, titled, "What is the Function of the Brain?"
What is the fundamental function of the brain? I think that's where we left off. Why the brain, which has evolved millennia upon millennia, has had tremendous experience of every kind, sorrow, pleasure, and the uncertainty, death. Why such a brain has not solved this problem? And who is going to solve the problem? The leaders, new leaders, new political statesmen, the new priests, the new ideology. We have tried all that. Man has tried every way to bring about peace in the world and also peace in himself. And the brain, which is a very, very complex affair, capable of extraordinary technological progress, and yet that very brain has become very primitive and has not and has not solved any of its problems. I hope you don't mind. What is the function of the brain? Just to go on living like this? Acquiring great knowledge in every field and using that knowledge to destroy each other, to destroy the earth, nature, and all the rest of it. We all know this very well. And one asks, if one is at all serious, and we are here a gathering of people who are serious, I hope, not casual visitors, but who are taking life seriously, they must inevitably ask, what is the function of the brain? Most of us are only concerned with ourselves. If we are at all frank and honest, we are concerned with ourselves. Self-interest, from the highest category of people, intellectual and so on, down to the most primitive people, the educated and the uneducated, the sophisticated and the religious people. They may identify themselves with something noble, but that very identification is part of self-interest. And the brain, our brain, is concerned only with that. Personal problems, problems of mathematics, problems of computer, and so on. But basically, we are concerned with ourselves. That's a fact, right? However much we may try to hide the self-interest in noble work, in meditation, in belonging to various groups, the self-interest dominates, consciously or unconsciously. If we are honest, look into ourselves and our activities, political, religious, and so on, we are only concerned basically with ourselves. And we have lived that way from the beginning of time. And we are still living that way. And so the brain only functions in a very, very small, limited field. Sorry. Patience. Is that all the function of the brain? To be concerned with itself with its problems, with its pleasures and sorrows and pain, ambition, greed, and so on. That's the way we have lived. And the result of that in the world is chaos. Each one wanting to fulfill, wanting to achieve, whether illumination, enlightenment, or become a big businessman. It's the same thing. So we have reduced our brain, which is an extraordinary instrument, into something so petty. And we have reduced that brain to be very, very limited. Right? It may be extraordinarily capable in the technological world. The marvelous instruments that are created, instruments of war, instruments of surgery, medicine, communication, computer. There, the brain has functioned with an extraordinary vitality, with extraordinary capacity. And that very brain is only concerned with its own self-protective activity. This is all obvious fact. We're only dealing with facts, not with ideals, not with ideas, not with theories, facts. As we explained the other day, facts are something that has been done in the past and remembered, something that is being done now. Those are the facts. From those facts, we abstract ideas, conclusions, strong opinions, which have nothing to do with facts. So, the brain lives on memories and not on facts. This is very important to understand if we are going to explore together what is the function of the brain, what is the deep quality of a brain that can penetrate and find out its deep function. We are dealing with facts only, which is that we are a series of movements of memory, which we talked about here the other day, memories. That is, the faculty to remember. To remember things that have happened and the things that are happening now. So the memory has become very extraordinarily important, which has nothing to do with facts. My son is dead, is gone. And I remember there is only remembrance. And on those remembrances I live. On those memories, on those incidents which we had together, I cherish those memories. Right? Which, please, you are doing this. I'm not telling you something which you are not doing. So we are a series of movements of memory and time. Memory is time. Right? Memory is the reaction of experience, knowledge, and the things that one has remembered. This is what the self is, what we are. I do not know if you have ever inquired into what is the present, what is now. Is it the cessation of memory, or we don't know what the now is at all? May I go into a little bit of this? Zero contains all the numbers. Mathematically. Zero was invented by the ancient Hindus, and in the zero, all the numbers contain. Is the now, please listen, is the now the totality of all time? I wonder. We'll go into this further. So the brain, having cultivated self-interest, which is the accumulation of memories, and so the brain has become a very, very small psychological instrument. Obviously. When I'm thinking about myself all day long, it's a very small affair. Or when I think about the whole world, it is still a small affair. I don't know if you can understand. We are moving together, I hope. Right, sir? So, why has the brain got caught in this narrow circle of the self? The self, the me, the ego, and all that is nothing but words and memories. Right? So, which is so. And that self has become so terribly important. And when one is concerned with oneself, all our actions must be psychologically limited. And where and where there is limitation, there must be conflict. I am a Jew. You are an Arab. That's a limitation. A tribalism which is limited. And I cling to my limitation, and you cling to your limitation, and therefore the perpetual conflict. If you are constantly repeating, I'm a Russian, and identified with that particular country, tradition, language, and all the literature of that country, it's very, very limited. So, we have reduced the brain seeking security in the self, has made itself limited, psychological. So there is a contradiction between the psychological limitation and the extraordinary, limitless technological progress. Is this the function of the brain? To live perpetually in conflict. And therefore, there is never a liberation, a freedom. Is this the function of the brain? Just to live in a small area, psychological. And is it possible, when one understands the nature of the self, as we briefly explained, is it possible to break down this limitation? And who is to break it down? You understand? This limitation has been brought about by thought. Thought which has created or sought in the limitation security. And thought itself is limited. Because thought is the outcome of vast experience, accumulated knowledge, stored in the brain, in the very brain cells. No, the speaker is not an expert. I've watched very carefully. And thought is the outcome of memory. Right? As memory is limited, knowledge will always be limited. And experience is never complete. You understand? So, the brain is functioning with the only instrument, the limited thought. Is this clear? Are we moving together? And so, we are perpetually living in conflict, in struggle, in pain and sorrow. Because we seek security in the limitation. In memories, and so on. That's simple. So is it the function of the brain to find security, survival, physical survival? One must survive physically, unless, of course, one is a little bit dotty, then that's a different matter. But one seeks physical security and also psychological security. Is there psychological security at all? Please, don't accept this. Go into it very carefully with the speaker. Together we are examining. We are not imposing a thing on you. We are not trying to convince you of anything. I really mean this. We are not trying to convert you to some philosophy, which is I'm not, please. So we are together, walking, perhaps hand in hand, down a lane, shady, full of dapple light, and the beauty of the earth around us. And we're talking about serious things, not petty little things, because we're both serious. And we say, is this what we have reduced our life to? Just seeking self-security in the limitation. And physically, there is no security because of wars, of racial, tribal conflict, ideological conflict between the Russians, the totalitarians, and the so-called democratic, the West and the East. They are preparing for war, you know that. Of course, they won't listen. You can't talk to the politicians, because they're concerned to preserve their own position. You know the rest, I don't. So, we're asking, is that the only function of the brain? To seek security in limitation. That's what we are doing. And in the search for security in limitation, we are bringing about havoc in the world. Right? Such great disorder, confusion. It's again obvious. Now, what is the function of thought? Because that's the only instrument the brain has. We're all together in this? Please. What is the function of thought? What is thought? What is thinking? We all think. Whether you are highly educated, sophisticated, or the most uneducated person, hungry, very little food and all the rest of it, he also thinks. The sophisticated, the educated, the highly person who can express things clearly, he thinks. And the person who is not, he also thinks. So thinking is common to all of us. Right? It's not your thinking. You may think and express it differently. You may be artist, you may be a mathematician, biologist, and so on, and I may be layman, but we both think. So thinking is not yours. Thinking is not individual. Please, this is a fundamental thing to understand. And yet this is what we are doing. This is what I think. My opinion, my judgment, my values of opinions. Right? See what is happening to us. We have reduced the whole vast process of thinking as mine. Right? And also, we ought to inquire if your brain is separate from another. Please, don't, we're going to it slowly, don't get impatient or cling to your own particular point of view. Brain has evolved through time, through thousands and thousands upon thousands of years of experience, knowledge, and all the activities of thought in the world, technologically, personally, and all that, thinking. And we have said that it's my brain that through which I think. Is that so? Is your brain yours? Or it is the result of thousands of years of evolution. So it is not your brain or my brain, it's brain. I wonder if you see the depth of this. And the brain is the center of our consciousness. Right? What is our consciousness? Not according to the experts, but when you ask yourself that question, your consciousness, what is it? Your beliefs, your conclusions, your opinions, the 2,000 years programmed, as a Christian, or a 5,000 years as Hindu, and so on. Right? Your consciousness is the reaction, the reflexes, the fears, the pleasures, the sorrows, the pain, the grief, and all the misery of human beings. That's your consciousness. Is your consciousness different from another? Or your consciousness is like the consciousness of all humanity. Because they suffer in Russia, in India, in China. They may have outward garments different, the environment may be different, but psychologically, which is the content of our consciousness, is common, is shared by all human beings. Right? So your brain and your consciousness is shared by all human beings. So you are the rest of mankind. You may be a German, a Swiss, and a proud Englishman. But you are the rest of mankind. Right? So, it is not an intellectual concept. It's not an idea, a romantic, sentimental something, but it's a fact. And when that is deeply real, and that is the truth, then your whole outlook on a life changes. Then you are responsible for all humanity. It's rather frightening, but it is so. So, one has to understand that in this investigation, we are not being self-centered. We are not cultivating the self more and more and more. We are not making the self more intelligent. But we are like the rest of mankind. Out of that comes compassion. You understand?
The second extract is from the 6th talk in Madras, 1979, titled, "Can the Brain Only Register What is Necessary?"
Is it possible to register only what is necessary? Well, nothing else. Understand the beauty of the question, the implications of that question, the depth of that question. We say it is possible. I will explain, but the explanation is not the fact. Don't be caught up in the explanations. Through the explanation, come to the fact. Then the explanation has no value. The commentators make explanations, but they never come to the fact. Right? So that we are saying what has continuity is the movement of time, is the movement of thought, the movement of knowledge from the past modifying itself in the present and proceeding. That is the whole process of registration. Right? Follow that. The whole movement of registration of the brain. Otherwise you couldn't have knowledge of today. So that's the whole movement. And we are saying that movement has taken over the psychological field. Right? Because one sees knowledge is necessary, otherwise you couldn't function, I couldn't talk. But I won't bring in my talking, that's a different matter. That is tremendously interesting. If you want to go into it, I won't go into it now. We said knowledge is continuity. And this continuity, brain has found safety in this continuity. And therefore it must register. Right? But knowledge is always limited. Right? There is no omnipotence knowledge. So the brain has been, having found security in the movement of knowledge, clings to it and translates every incident, accident according to the past. Therefore, the past has tremendous importance to the brain, because the brain itself is the past. And your own intellect says, logically as we have explained, intellect says, which is the verbal explanation of the intellect says, I see very clearly that which has continuity has nothing new. There's no new perfume. There's no new heaven, no new earth. And so, intellect says, is there an ending of continuity and not bring danger to the brain? You follow? Because without continuity, it gets lost. So it says, if I end continuity, if the intellect says to itself, if I end continuity, what then? The brain demands to be secure. What is then? If it can find something in the ending and the beginning, then it says, all right, I've got it. I'm safe. You understand? Now the brain has said, I can only function in security. Whether it's false or true, security. And continuity has given me security, which is the registration process. Follow? Registering. That has given it security. And you come along and say to me, to the brain, register only what is necessary, relevant, and don't register anything else. You understand my question? It is suddenly at a loss. You say, what do you mean by it? Because it's functioning out of security. So give me security and I'll go after it. You understand this? I say there is a security, but not this kind of security, which is to put knowledge, thought in its right place. Right? The very orderliness of life is possible only when the brain has understood that it is living in disorder, which it calls security. And when it realizes that security implies putting everything in order, which is everything relevant and nothing irrelevant, you're following all this? Then the brain says, I've understood this. I've got it. which is having an insight into this whole movement of continuity. Right? You're following? It has an insight into it. And that insight is the outcome of complete order, which is the brain has put everything in its right place. Then there is total insight into the whole movement of consciousness. And therefore, it means the brain will only register that which is not, which is necessary, nothing else. You got it, you captured something. In that is implied the activity of the brain undergoes a change. The very structure of the brain undergoes a change, because the seeing something for the first time anew brings a new function to operate. You understand all this? Huh? So your arm, this arm is developed because of function. Right? So when the brain discovers sees something new, there's a new functioning being born, right? A new organism is taking place. Doesn't matter. So we are saying it is wholly necessary for the brain to become very young, fresh, innocent, alive, youthful, when there is no psychological registration at all.
The final extract in this episode is from Krishnamurti's 7th talk in Saanen, 1970, titled, Can the Brain Be Quiet?
You can observe yourself, for yourself, how the brain operates. The brain is the result of the past, of time, of experience. It is the storehouse of memory. And memory is the past. And this memory responds, all the time responding, of like and dislike, justifying, condemning, and so on. Responding all the time, according to its conditioning, according to the culture, religion, education is brought up in. That storehouse of memory from which thought arises guides most of our life. Right? Oh Lord. You're following all this? Are we going together? Don't look so worried, please. If you don't quite understand it, now we'll go into it a little later afterwards. So relax and take it easily. Because it's really quite an immense thing if you can grasp it. And that brain, which is the storehouse of the past, is directing. Is shaping our lives. Every day and every minute, conscious or unconscious. And that's one of the distorting factors, which is thought, which is the response of the past being knowledge, experience, and so on. The me, which is the very essence of the word and thought. Now, can that old brain be completely quiet? Only awakened when it is necessary to operate, to function, to speak, to do, act. But the rest of the time completely still. Have you ever tried to do this? No, of course, you haven't. You see, this is you'll all smoke very easily. You do things without deep thought, doesn't matter, that's your affair. Meditation implies not the orthodox meditation, not the Zen meditation, not the meditation through repetition of words, all that is stupefying, mechanical, no meaning. The real meditation is to find out whether the brain, with all its activities, with all its experience, can be absolutely quiet. Not force it, because the moment you force it, there is again duality. The entity that says, by Jove, I like to have marvelous experience, therefore I must force my brain to be quiet. Will it? You will never do it. But if you begin to inquire, watch, observe, listen to all the movements of thought, its conditioning, its pursuits, its fears, its pleasures, how the brain operates, then you will see the brain becomes extraordinarily quiet. And the quietness is not dormancy, sleep, but tremendously active and therefore quiet. You understand a machine, a big dynamo that's working perfectly, ticking over, well-oiled, doesn't hardly make any sound. It's only when there is friction, there is noise. So the brain, and therefore the body, must be completely quiet. So one has to find out whether your body can completely sit still or lie still without any movement. Again, not force it. Because the body, the brain are interrelated. Psychosomatically, they function not separately. Shall we go on? We're meeting each other. We are communicating with each other. There are various practices to make the body still. Again, these practices imply suppression. The body wants to get up and go away, so walk. And you say, no, I must sit quiet. And the battle begins, wanting to go out and wanting to sit still. And in this, there's this whole thing called yoga. You ever heard about it? Oh Lord. You're rather, I suppose, the whole world is upside down. When one is concerned only with social activity, social reform, revolution, all the other things escape or put aside. But if you want to understand the whole business of life, you have to understand everything that is contained in it. Human life, psychologically. The word yoga, you'll find dozens of books all over the world, written by all the specialists, means to join together. The very word join together is wrong, which implies duality. You understand? Therefore it has quite a different meaning, which we won't go into now. Probably it was invented, this particular series of exercises and breathing, many thousands of years ago in India. It is to keep the glands and the nerves and the whole system functioning very healthily, without medicine, and keep it highly sensitive. And the body needs to be sensitive, otherwise you can't have a very clear brain. If you stuff yourself with wine, meat and all the rest of, how can your brain function clearly? Your smoking, drugs and all the rest of it becomes such superficial, immediate satisfactions without any understanding what is beyond it. Now yoga is a certain kind of practice of exercises, not something mysterious through exercises. One has to do it to keep the body supple. You understand? The brain have to have all the blood it needs, and therefore right breathing. You understand all these things? If I may be a little personal, we do it every day 2 hours. Regularly. Not the regularity of machinery. I won't go into all that, doesn't matter. So, one has to have very good, healthy, sane body. And therefore, a brain that is capable of thinking rationally, healthily, objectively, non-impersonally, therefore efficiently, and a brain that is absolutely quiet, not mechanically made quiet. Now you can see the truth of this, can't you? The simple fact of it, that one needs to have a very good, healthy, sensitive, alert body, a brain that functions very clearly, non-emotionally, non-personally, and such a brain to be absolutely quiet. You can see the fact of that. The simple, logical fact of it. Now, how is this to be brought about? Do you understand what I mean? How can the brain, which is so tremendously active, not only during the daytime, but when you go to sleep, how can this brain be so completely relaxed or completely quiet? You understand my question? No method will do it, obviously. Please follow all this. No method, right? Do you see that? Because method implies mechanical repetition, which stupefies the brain and therefore makes the brain dull, and you, in that dullness, you think you have marvelous experiences. So how is this brain, which is so tremendously active, which is never still, because it's always chattering to itself or with others, judging, evaluating, liking, disliking, turning over all the time. How can that brain be completely still? You understand the importance of a brain being still. The importance, not what the speaker says is important. For yourself, do you see the really importance, the extraordinary importance, that this brain should be completely quiet? Because the moment it acts, it can only act in response of the past. It can only act in terms of thought. And therefore, again, the operation of the past. And it's only such a brain that's completely can observe. Right? One can observe a cloud, a tree, a flowing river with fairly quiet brain. Right? You can see those mountains, the extraordinary light on those mountains. And the brain can be completely still. You have noticed this, haven't you? Now, how has that happened? How does the mind, facing something of extraordinary magnitude, like a very, very, very complex machinery, like a marvelous computer, or a magnificent sunset or a mountain, how does it become completely quiet for even a split second? Have you noticed when you give a child a good toy, how the toy absorbs the child? Then the child is concerned with it, playing with it, and is absorbed by the toy. In the same way, the mountain, the beauty of a tree, the flowing waters, absorb the minds and makes the mind by its greatness still. Right? That is, the brain is made still by something. Now, can the brain be quiet without an outside factor entering into it? You're following all this? And because they haven't found the way, therefore they say grace of God, prayers, right? Faith, absorption in Jesus, in this or in that. And we see all that, this absorption by something outside, can be a dull, a stupefied mind can do this. We're trying to find out can this happen, this quiet, free brain that is completely quiet, without any interference. Right? You have understood the question? If it is not quiet, one of the factors is dream. You're following all this? Is this too much? Don't be, if you don't understand, it's up to you. The brain is active all day, endlessly. The moment it wakes up till it goes to sleep, it is on the move. And when you go to bed and go to sleep, the activity of the brain is still going on. Right? The activity of the brain are dreams. Right? The same movement of the day is carried on during sleep. And therefore, the brain has never a rest. Never a moment it says, I finished. It's over. Because it's carrying on the problems which it has accumulated into sleep. And when you wake up, those problems go on. It's a vicious circle. So, a brain that is to be quiet must have no dreams at all. Because when the mind is quiet during sleep, the brain is quiet during sleep, there is a totally different quality entering into the brain, into the mind. We'll go into that a little later, if you're interested in it. So, we're asking, how does it happen that the brain, which is so tremendously, eagerly, enthusiastically active, can naturally, easily, without any effort and suppression, be quiet? I'll show it to you. As we said during the day, it is active, endlessly. Moment you wake up, you look out of the window and say, oh, awful rain. Oh, it's a marvelous, lovely morning, but too hot. You've started. At that moment, when you look out of the window, not to say a word, not suppressing words, not to realize that by saying what a lovely morning, what a horrible rain, this or that, the brain has started. But if you watch out of the window and not say a word, which doesn't mean you suppress the word, just to observe, without all the memory of the past rushing, just to observe. Right? So there you have the clue. There you have the key. To observe without the old brain responding. Therefore, when the old brain doesn't respond, there is a quality of the new mind, new brain coming into being. Are you getting all this? You can observe the hills, the mountains, the river, the valleys, the shadows, the lovely trees, and the marvelous cloud with full of light and glory beyond the mountains. To look at it without a word, without comparing. But it becomes much more difficult when you look at your neighbor, at your wife, your husband, your another person. There you're already got the images established, and it becomes much more difficult to observe your wife, your husband, your neighbor, your politician, your priest, whatever it is, absolutely without an image. Just to observe. And you will see, when you so observe, so clearly see, the action becomes extraordinarily vital. Therefore it becomes a complete action, which is not carried over the next minute. You're meeting this. You understand? One has problems. Not sleeping well, quarreling with wife, problems. Deeply, superficially. And we carry these problems from day to day. Dreams, the repetition of these problems, the repetition of fear, pleasure, the problem over and over and over and over again. That obviously stupefies the mind. Makes the mind dull, brain too. Now, is it possible to end the problem as it arises? You understand? Not carry it over. I have a problem, somebody has insulted me. I'm taking a silly problem. At that moment, the old brain responds instantly. Right? Saying, you're also. Now, before the old brain responds, to be aware of what the man or woman has said, something which is unpleasant, to have an interval between what he has said and the response of the old brain, to have a gap. You understand this? So that the old brain is responding slowly, doesn't immediately jump into the battle. So if you watch during the day the movement of thought in action, thought is action. And if you watch that and you realize that it is breeding problems, and problems are something which are incomplete, which had to be carried over. But if you watch that with a brain that is fairly quiet, then you will see action becomes instantaneous. So there is no carrying over of a problem. You got this? No carrying over the insult or the praise or something, problem. Carrying over the next minute. It's finished. So when you go to when there is sleep, the brain is no longer carrying on the old activities of the day. It has complete rest. Right? And therefore the brain then being quiet in sleep, there takes place not only rejuvenation of the whole structure in itself, but a quality of innocency comes into being. Because only the innocent mind can see what is truth. Right? Not the complicated mind, not the philosopher, not the priest, not the brain that is constantly repetitive, mechanical. Innocent mind is the brain as well as the body, the mind, the whole entity. Not entity, the whole being, not even the being, it's that whole thing in which the body, the heart, the brain, the whole of that, if there is this alertness, watchfulness during the day, and when there is sleep, there is a certain quality of innocency that happens. And it is only this innocent mind, which has never been touched by thought, it's only such an innocent mind that can see what is truth, what is reality, if there is something beyond measure. That is meditation. Not all the phony stuff. Therefore, to come upon this extraordinary beauty of truth with its ecstasy, you must lay the foundation. The foundation is the understanding of thought which breeds fear and sustains pleasure. The understanding of order and therefore virtue. And therefore the freedom from all conflict and aggression and brutality, violence. That is the foundation. Without that, you can play tricks. And what you will have are the tricks of the conjurer. But once one has laid this foundation on freedom, then there is this sensitivity which is supreme intelligence. And from that, the whole life one leads becomes entirely different.